a new #1 issue here. But it followed the flow of a classic Golden Age story in which the introduction showed all of the JSAers sitting around the table talking about a common threat. The main body of the story was about individual JSAers or JSAers going around with their sidekicks, having their own separate trial against the common foe. And then in the conclusion, the team rallied together to defeat the common enemy. And now the JSA returns part really came to the fore in the final pages of the Justice Society Returns. Again, I don't want to spoil it because it's just a great story, and I'm sure it's out there in trade easy enough to pick up. But essentially, in the last pages of the Justice Society Returns, readers got look first at the JSA from a moment in time in 0 Hour before finally getting the reveal that yes, there would be a new JSA with some of its original members coming soon. And so that's what led into Volume 1 of JSA. Originally written by James Robinson and David S. Goyer, but after a few issues, a young Jeff Johns, who was just beginning to make a name for himself as a comics writer, came on board. And of course, over time, Mr. Johns would come to be seen as the co-writer or the principal writer on JSA, and he would even write the book on his own for the last, nearly the last 30 issues of the title. Again, JSA, for those of you who have never read it or read it in years past, in the individual floppy issues, but are looking for a really good read from yesteryear, JSA is all in trade. You can get it digitally. Sure, if you go on eBay or Amazon, you can find any number of copies of all of the volumes of the original JSA, and it's just it's a very dense read. There's a lot that goes on in that title, but it's one of those runs where if you're stuck on a deserted island, you would want to have it with you for sure. The first arc in JSA is titled Justice Be Done, and it started off with the death of the Golden Age Sandman, Wesley Dodds, and he died by suicide. What happened was longtime JSA foe Mordru was seeking the identity of the newborn who was destined to inherit the soon-to-be reformed helm of Naboo and become a new Dr. Fate. And so Wesley had knowledge of this through his gift and curse of prophetic nightmares. And in order to prevent Mordru from entering his mind and taking that information, Wesley threw himself off a cliff. And so there was a funeral for Mr. Dodds, eulogy of which was delivered by his former teen sidekick, Sanderson Hawkins, a.k.a. Sandy the Golden Boy, who would take up the costume moniker of Sand in the modern day. And there were a number of attendees at the funeral. There was, of course, the three elder statesmen, Jay Garrick, Wildcat, Ted Grant, and, of course, Alan Scott, who at this time was going by the name Sentinel and yet wearing his classic Golden Age Green Lantern uniform minus the ring, of course. In addition to the three, there was also an elderly Johnny Thunder, The Jack Knight Starman, of course, was present since Mr. Robinson was the co-writer on this initial arc. Queen Hippolyta was there wearing her Wonder Woman armor. Thanks to the John Byrne retcon in the mid-90s, it was established that Queen Hippolyta had served as the Wonder Woman of the JSA in the 1940s. There was also Courtney Whitmore, aka Star Spangled Kid, who would go on to become Stargirl in later arcs. And Ms. Whitmore was, of course, created by Jeff Johns and based on his late sister, Courtney Johns. The android Hourman, who went by the alternate name of Tyler, was also present. Al Rothstein, godson of the Golden Age Adam, Al Pratt, decided to ditch the Mohawk some time ago. He also traded in his old costumed identity of Nuklon for a new costume that paid homage to his godfather's original Golden Age costume, and he took on the masked identity of Atom Smasher. As well, Black Canary attended the funeral, and they would later be joined by Kendra Saunders, who had somehow managed to survive a successful suicide attempt, and her great-grandfather took one look at her and realized that this was not his great-granddaughter anymore, at least not in her mind, rather his cousin, or his sister rather, the Golden Age Hawk Girl, Shira Hall, had reincarnated by basically having her spirit walk into Kendra's body. And of course, I've talked about Kendra Saunders / Shira Hall in greater detail in my earlier Hawkman Spotlight series. And the team would later be joined very briefly by the Jared Stevens Fate, who they found had actually been murdered. And so this set off a whole investigation, which led to the search for the Fate baby. And in the end, the Fate baby was discovered, aged to adulthood upon coming into contact with the helm of Naboo, and it was revealed that the new Dr. Fate was Hector Hall, the son of the Golden Age Hawks. Now, in terms of Alan Scott's participation in this first arc, first I want to comment on the art, which was primarily by Steven Sadowski, and I really like the way that he depicted Alan. At times, he depicted Alan as someone who was on the more youthful side, but as time passed, he found a really nice balance in depicting Alan's physical age. So Alan looked like somebody who was, on some days, a man who looked to be somewhere in his early 40s, but towards the end of Sadowski's run, Alan looked to be a man his late 40s, early 50s, but still very well fit. I really like the way that Sadowski drew the costume. It looked quite accurate. The hairstyle looked right. Thinking of the near climactic battle with Mordru for the well-being of the Fate baby, Mordru actually went toe-to-toe with Alan at one point, and Sadowski drew Alan in this great pose with his fists clenched and just generating a ton of Starheart energy in his fists. And Mordru said, "What is this? A mortal channeling the power of the Starheart?" To which Alan replied, "Well, I call it the green flame these days, buddy." And this sets something of a precedent in that there were a number of stories which I read in the ensuing years in which Alan would be referred to as the keeper of the Emerald Flame, the keeper of the Starheart, the one who wielded the Emerald Flame. I never minded that, really. It was kind of a nice way of distinguishing Alan from other Green Lanterns, well, specifically the Green Lantern Corps. Now, of course, with him being a magic user as well, of course, Mordru would be aware of the existence of the Starheart. I just found it kind of interesting that Mordru expressed surprise at a mortal channeling the Starheart. I'm kind of wondering if there was some idea at the time of maybe presenting the idea that before coming to Earth, the Starheart came into contact with another alien being who wielded the power of the Starheart. It would have been interesting to see if this would have been expanded in any further detail. Kind of neat that Alan referred to it as the Green Flame at the time, because in later years he would go back and refer to the Starheart by name. I also really love how in this story arc there's one page where Jack Knight is observing Alan in battle, and the one thing that makes these earlier traits for JSA dated is the fact that Alan's referred to as Sentinel. But I really like how within this first story arc you had one of the characters referring to Alan as the big guy and the Justice Society's powerhouse. Also, Jack Knight's dialogue in this particular issue, I want to say it was issue number 5, establishes that Alan still has the weakness to wood. So even though he was channeling the power of the Starheart and wasn't carrying a lantern anymore, that didn't negate his weakness to wood. So the end of this first arc would end with the Justice Society being reformed. The various costume heroes who had met during this first arc decided that upon Hector Hall becoming Dr. Fate and Mordru being defeated, that this was the time to reform the Justice Society of America. And the team had a new headquarters. Wesley Dodd's old brownstone became the new Justice Society Museum and headquarters, with, at the time, former Green Lantern John Stewart acting as the architect in rebuilding and renovating the brownstone so that it would become a proper museum and headquarters for the team. There's also the question of who would be the first chairman or chairperson or chair of the Justice Society. And it was actually Alan who nominated Sand as the first chair of the JSA, to which Sand was amazed. He thought that it would be Alan who would become the chairman, given that he was one of the 3 oldest members. He was an original member of the JSA, and between Alan, Jay, and Wildcat, Alan was easily the most powerful of the 3. And I really like what Alan said to Sand. He said, "I'm happy you're playing elder statesman. The JSA needs new blood leading it." And this set a precedent for a number of comics over the years in which Alan was referred to as one of the elder statesmen. And I really like how Alan transitioned into that role throughout the pre-Flashpoint era, where he was one of the originals. He would later come to be referred to as the Superman before there was a Superman, because of course in the post-Crisis and pre-Flashpoint eras, it was established that the JSA were the first generation of heroes, and Superman was of the present-day generation of heroes. But that's what really makes Alan stand out in general. Throughout his time in the